Yeah.
All right, yeah. Sorry. So this was the story that everyone's been talking about for the last 2 years, but this is the first actual official word on the AirTrunk IPO. There we go.
Speculation for years, shall we say?
Yeah, but so now what the actual update that's happened is Macquarie Asset Management, the owners of AirTrunk, along with investment from Robin himself, have sent a request for proposal to 7 investment banks in Australia, looking at valuations to list them on the ASX. I think the proposal letter that Macquarie sent described a valuation of well north of 10 billion Aussie dollars, which is 6.4 billion US, although 10 does sound like a nice round number. Well, I'll go to the Australian first on this one. This is a big story.
We're also proud being Australian. No, look, all jokes aside, I mean, we all know, Robin's story from growing this business to where it is now, and it is the success story that a lot of people try to emulate, in the region. So, as James mentioned, pardon me, this has been talked about for a long time. It makes a lot of sense when you look at AirTrunk now, who are trying to do these mega builds. Robin recently attended an event and was quoted as talking a lot around AI and building data centers 10 times the size. If you are going to build data centers 10 times the size, you need the funding to do that. So I don't think it's any coincidence them announcing this now while they're announcing AI. These sites sort of tell you that they're going to be huge, huge sites. And look at the markets they're in. Again, places like Japan, again, which we just talked about, that's where a lot of mega builds are going. And of course, emerging markets, or is Malaysia an emerging market now? It seems to have boomed as well.
Well, yeah, I don't know how you describe Johor, but let's call it an emerging market for the moment, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'd typically refer to AirTrunk probably as a tier 1 player to date. But James, that's a valuation. I mean, how we obviously there's value in the business, there's value in the pipeline, the brand. But in terms of the capacity, what's on DC about for these guys?
Well, what's interesting in terms of their live capacity, and we need to familiarise themselves with our exact definitions, but we basically define live capacity as anything with IT load running through it. So we've got about 350 megawatts of live capacity for AirTrunk. This does not include powered shells, because they do obviously have some contracted powered shells across the region. So 350 megawatts live with big blue chip customers in it, primarily hyperscalers, but then also a pretty significant pipeline. 1,300 megawatts ish. But what I think is kind of important to point out here is it's kind of qualified. So when I say qualified, land, power secured. So take a look at their TOC 1 site, for example, which on their website it will be down as 300 megawatts. It's 300 megawatts. It's not built out, but they've got land, power. They've got a substation beside it to support that. So when customers need it, they can build it out. So I think that's the really important differentiating factor with AirTrunk compared to some of the other announcements you may see, where they may announce 200 megawatts, a 200 megawatt campus, but only have power for 40 megawatts or something like that. So that's where a lot of the value is. Proven track record, obviously, blue chip clients, long lease terms. So I think that's how they've got to such a high valuation.
Yeah, it would be uncouth to talk about the financial success of any individuals, but Macquarie certainly will be happy with the performance. So back in 2020, Macquarie acquired an 88% stake in the business from Goldman Sachs and Sixth Street. At the time, the business was valued at 3 billion Aussie or 1.9 US. And looking at the valuations we're talking about now in terms of the IPO, I think it was particularly across the last couple of years in any real assets class. That's a pretty huge multiple, and considering it was bought in as a post-development sort of a second funding cycle as well. So I'm sure everyone will be very happy, and many corks being popped across Sydney should this IPO go through successfully.
Well, I was about to say, let's not preempt it too much. Let's see. At the moment, there's been a lot of stuff announced in the media. Again, I don't think it's any coincidence with what they're trying to do there. It hasn't actually gone through yet. But one thing AirTrunk are really good at doing is speed to market. And we're in a market here where the quickest to market usually wins, usually get the customers. So, to your point, although they've only got only 350 megawatt, but having that 1,300 megawatt, you can see that be deployed in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. So, nice little segue onto our next story then. So, Rich, you mentioned AI and a lot of companies looking at raising different funding. And I've talked with a few clients recently about how there's probably going to be a different stratification in data centers, where you've got some companies who can deliver these huge capacities for AI and some companies who are targeting different segments of the market, colo. Now, I'm not saying that Singtel are going after AI, but Singtel took on $800 million. This was US, I think we established in the end, of funding from KKR and so this is for the as we reported earlier in the year, in June, they separated their real assets into a company called Digital Infraco, which owns the data centers. And this is the part that's CEO by Bill Chang, and KKR have invested into that. So the valuation they're giving that is $4 billion US, I believe. And yes, as Singtel, but Singtel is much smaller than AirTrunk. What do you make of that, James, in terms of the capacity they have and the pipeline?
Well, it's interesting because obviously they've got a number of established DCs in Singapore, some of which are kind of more legacy assets, not saying that in a bad way, but kind of more telco/retail sites. Then they've got a couple of newer developments in Singapore, including the one in Tuas, which of course has got the landing station element to it as well. They've also got a couple of projects going on, the one in Thailand, the one in Batam, and I believe a few more in the pipeline. I think they're actively looking at a number of different markets and quite a number of different projects. So I think it's a lot of it is based on that. Like they've got, obviously being a legacy provider in Singapore, they've got a lot of the clients that you would want and that would add value to a data center business as clients, both on the retail side of things and also wholesale/hyperscale clients as well. So I think that's where KKR saw the value. KKR, I think it made no secret that they've been trying to get into the DC space in APAC for the last little while. So I don't want to say I was surprised by this deal. It did catch me slightly off guard. Like we'd heard whispers about it a couple of months ago. So yeah, it was interesting that it finally got announced last week or so.
Yeah, it's hot on the heels of the announcement that CyrusOne is investing in Japan. CyrusOne is probably the best known KKR data center investment. So I guess this means no Singtel in Japan.
Well, if you make a Singapore telco and another, thank you. Yeah, that's very me because I'm the expert on Japanese Singapore telcos. I think James' point was interesting. You know, I was wondering myself why KKR? Why did KKR come in and invest in what is pretty much a Singaporean icon, right? I mean, Singtel is on the same page with Singapore Airlines for Singaporeans. Why not a local? But to your point, they've been trying to look at ways to plug into the market. Singtel have been very vocal about that they're going to build green data centers, and they're actively looking for sustainable tech where they can actually do that. We're at a point where sustainable tech, although the price is coming down, it's still more expensive than actually building a traditional data center. So there is significant, investment that actually is needed. And I mean, I think it was only a year or two ago when KKR launched their $1 billion data center fund. I think that was over in Europe, you know, from memory.
But they do separately have the biggest infrastructure fund in Asia. So right. It was launched, I think, last year, $3 billion under David Luoff. So they've got plenty of cash. Okay,
so this would probably tell you then if they're also being strategic. If they're going to invest in Singtel, probably it's a little bit of watch this space for KKR to see what other sort of really, you know, country-based organisations they go after. And if they're going after particularly a telco, that sort of tells you their intent as well.
Yeah, and one thing to the point you made about CyrusOne, one thing that we're seeing or that we've got a bit of visibility on is that people are actually, some of these funds are backing multiple operators to kind of service different markets. So Singtel, this is speculation, but Singtel could be the kind of Southeast Asia play. And then they might have CyrusOne to take on the Japan piece. Maybe if they go to Korea, they'd use CyrusOne as well or something like that. But I'm not sure how public some of these deals are.
Yeah, I'm also being very mindful of some of my customers here, what I can share, what I can't.
So some funds are looking at multiple operators for different markets. Obviously, operators bring different strengths, different know-how, that sort of thing as well. So could be an element of that.
Speaking of operators who are pretty established in the region and becoming a household name, PDG have launched, Princeton Digital Group, for those who have launched their 6th data center facility in Jakarta. I took a little step back when I saw 6th, but I forgot about the acquisition of XL Axiata back in 2019, which was the 5 site. So, but yeah, they're well on their way in Jakarta.
Yeah. This is the JC2 site, which kind of sits in between industrial parks out to the east and the kind of city centre location. So it's kind of in between those two areas. 22 megawatt IT load, I believe. We've mentioned PDG on the show quite a lot in the last 6 months, particularly in relation to some of the green power arrangements and green power kind of initiatives they've put in place, which is going to service their Indonesia offering and this facility as well, I assume.
Yeah, so this one, I think, this was the facility that was named in the agreement with PT Sikar, with the biomass company in Indonesia. That's easy for you to say. This was the facility that was named as being from the get-go will be receiving power from that agreement. Although when the plant is operating on biomass, will be remain to be seen. Indonesia is a tough one from a power and sustainability point, Rich.
Yes and no, Reece. I mean, it's if we go back a few years ago, we all heard the stories about the lack of infrastructure. Even roads not being available, to get the physical hardware to the actual data center sites, the lack of power, disputes around land and everything. Now, I think they've sort of gone a little bit past that now. I think it's quite, I'd almost count Indonesia as a mature market now in terms of the players that are over there and the builds that are actually happening. PDG, look, smart outfit, right? They're one of the few organizations that have managed to crack both the US-based cloud players and the China-based cloud players as well. You usually find organizations usually gravitate towards one or the other. These guys have managed to actually do both. And I mean, if you have a look at they've already got 600 megawatt out of what did they have a few years ago? So they're actually, their business model must be working. The fact that they've got presence in China, outside of China, and they've got the US-based organizations coming to them as well. They've just got to grow bigger and bigger, these guys.
Yeah, they've grown pretty aggressively through acquisition, which contrasts it with the other successful platform we talked about earlier, AirTrunk, who are pretty much entirely greenfield. And I guess it's, to your point, James, this shows how different investors have got different strategies. Warburg, another company with multiple investments. So Warburg obviously is the biggest capital provider to PDG, but they also have investment from Ontario Teachers, I think, and one of the Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds. Adia. I think it's Adia.
It's one of them.
One of the big. It's a big sovereign wealth fund.
Oh, no, it's not. It's the third one. Sorry,
Put
it in the notes.
Do you guys memorize what sovereign wealth funds? This is what you do in your spare time.
I just try not to upset everyone around you, but no.
Reece will put it up on the screen.
Warburg, I will do that. I will do that. Warburg are backing PDG in a big way. They've also obviously announced funding for Evolution data centers, and they're a big stockholder in ESR. That's public information as well. So, Warburg are another one of these huge American private equity funds who've clearly got a lot of faith in the Asian data center market. The last story we've got on this week's one was new cloud regions. And I always like these stories where it's another, perhaps a less expected cloud player who's coming into the market, and it just shows that the growth of the customer base is getting bigger as well. Akamai, I honestly don't know too much about this company. We have talked about them 3 or 4 times, but I don't use many of their products. I know they're a content distribution provider, but they've launched new cloud regions this month and next month.
Yeah, so as per the notes you sent around, 7 cloud regions, including Japan, they're coming along pretty soon. So Akamai do have a number of, I want to say Singapore. I think they're probably more, I think they're established in the tier 1 markets, if you want to call them that already, and then adding another or either another or a new Japan side. This is interesting because it was in this article when it mentioned they took over the Linode developments, which I do remember happening, but I had forgotten that they had actually taken them over around this time last year, I think it was. So that was 11 sites which they kind of acquired from them. This is all going to be colo, of course, but means now they've got a pretty big footprint, and obviously not a different offering to the hyperscalers, but one that I think people, if they have got specific kind of requirements, should probably check out.
Yeah, I mean, Rich, you do a lot of work with Amazon and Microsoft. I mean, everyone chases Amazon and Microsoft. They're the biggest players in the game. But, these tier 2, and no disrespect to the companies when we say tier 2 cloud providers, but there is a whole, from Google through Alibaba, Oracle, and then even OVH. There's all these other companies that are going to be taking more and more capacity. Are you seeing work with these guys?
Yeah, and I mean, in a lot of ways, these guys can be more flexible, with customers as well. So, for example, if you go into an AWS data center, you have to connect to all the AWS cloud tools, right? Microsoft Azure, all the Azure cloud tools. The advantage of going to an Akamai is they might have some Amazon, some Google, they might have some Microsoft, whatever it may be. So it gives customers a lot more options to actually go out there and usually find that